Welcome back to our series on canning basics. I'm Mindy Turner with the Curry County Cooperative Extension Service, your family and consumer science agent. For this series, we are looking at canning basics, home food preservation, figuring out the how and the what, just some of the very basics that you can take and use if you are interested in starting some home canning projects. For this time, we're going to talk a little bit about canning you can trust. So, as we talked last time, home canning is a time honored way to preserve food. It's safe. Results depend on the science, using the approved methods. We're going to be looking for this month's newsletter as well as this series on the essential principles of that home canning, what that looks like. Even the best ingredients cannot make up for unsafe equipment, outdated instructions. So that's really what we're going to look at now is what are the things that we need to know and understand before we move forward. It can be very dangerous to both physically sometimes in the things that can go wrong and happen, but also in just eating the food later. And we don't want to waste it. It can be financially hurtful if we try to can and prepare a lot of things and we don't do it correctly and those things just become garbage. Or if we happens to be something that makes somebody sick. So we want to be very careful and know that we understand moving forward what that looks like. Information I'm sharing today comes from our New Mexico State University Master Food Preserver courses, which are intense courses. You're not going to know everything you need to know about food preservation from watching these short videos, but you're going to have a basic understanding of how things work, where to find more information, and just understand more about the terms. And if nothing else, walk away knowing how to keep things safe. And maybe this is not the process for you. So this time, like I said, one of the things I really want to focus on are what are the key sources. I get phone calls all the time. Well, I saw this recipe on TikTok, or I found this recipe in my grandmother's box, or all of the things that come back around. So it's really important that we verify and know the sources, what we're using to put things together in order to have safe, applicable food preservation. So first of all, your cooperative extension services at your land-grant universities all around the country will have information or access to information related to this. I am not a master food preserver, but I know where to go to find the resources and get the appropriate information to share with you when you have questions. So things through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or what we'll commonly see as USDA, your major manufacturers of home canning equipment. So the people who actually make the stuff that you're using to do this, they have to do a lot of research in order to be labeled for this. So their recipe books, their information is typically up to date and really good. We also recommend the Complete Guide to Home Canning. This is through USDA, and that was done. The latest version is 2009. Okay, we also use a lot. You'll see if you do read my newsletters, it's one of those I put out information specific to the National Food Preservation Network, which is through the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension and their land grant system. So some of the things we want to avoid, we want to not use just old cookbooks that we find anywhere. Gardening publications are written about gardening, not for food preservation. And then any of those out of date home canning publications that you have around, the science has changed, our knowledge of the science has changed. So it's important to consider that in selecting the recipes that we want to use. So then what do we need for equipment? So we've talked about two very specific recommended processes that we use with our low acid or our acid foods. So a boiling water canner, the jar is completely submerged and surrounded by water. The water must cover the jar tops at least 1 to 2 inches, so they have to be submerged. The heat is transferred from the boiling water through the contents of the jar. So the canner should not extend over the edge of the burner or the element, if you're doing this on the top of your stove, by more than 2 inches, because you're not going to get even heat distribution across the bottom. Used with lid on without pressurizing. So when we talk about the boiling water process, we're not pressurizing that container that we're actually doing the boiling in. So that's a key piece. What's different about boiling water versus a pressure canner. So a pressure canner is a large kettle with a cover that has a gauge that measures the pressure. So the cover gets locked down to make it steam tight, and it produces high enough temperatures to kill those spore-forming bacteria that we've talked about we don't want. So, but it has to be equipped with an accurate pressure gauge to register the steam pressure. So you can bring your lids to us that have the gauge on them, and we will test those at the extension office. Most of your local, if you're not in Curry County, most of your local extension offices have a tester that if you bring that by, they will be able to test that for you and tell you if the gauge needs to be replaced, if it's just a pound or two off and there's an adjustment you can make for that, or if it's working right on. And I'm gonna tell you guys, I've tested brand new ones that were off by a little bit, and I've tested some that are 80 years old that are right on. So it's just important to get those gauges tested and make sure that they're measuring the pressure like they should be. And of course, we want to make sure that anything you're using has that UL approval, if it's an electric one that you're plugging in, so that everything is covered by the electrical piece. So it's also important to note, we do have pressurized saucepans. I remember growing up, my grandma cooking beans in the pressure pot, but these are not made for canning. Okay, so it's not recommended. They're not large enough to do that. They're designed to cook that food under pressure, not to actually generate the heat that you need to do safe home food preservation. So along with that large equipment that's going to make this work, you're going to have your jars and your lids. And it's important to consider in getting those jars and lids what that needs to look like. So a canning jar, and you want to make sure you have a canning jar. They're made of a heat-tempered glass. Okay, so they can withstand those high levels of heat and not shatter. So that's important. They come in a variety of standard sizes. So you need to make sure which size you're using to adjust the processing time. And you cannot do in your canner, you cannot do a mix of sizes. Okay, you need to process all of your quart jars at one time, all of your half pints at one time, because the processing times are different based on the volume. They are reusable. So if you've canned things in them and you use them, you can wash them, dry them, make sure they're good and clean, and then you can use them again. Mason brand jars, so when we talk about canning jars, that's a Mason jar. They have to be used for all pressure canned foods. Okay, that's really important, again, because it has to do with the pressure and the heat in that machine. We want to prepare those jars. First of all, you want to inspect them. They need to not have cracks. They need to not have chips. You need to make sure that they're still in good shape, that they're clean. And then we're going to preheat them and pre-sterilize them. And you should have instructions on how and what to do with your device, whichever type you are using for that appliance or that came with the jars. So those are the things you want to look at and make sure that you're following all of the proper protocols. Now, this again, a question we get a lot. Well, I saved all of my spaghetti sauce jars from the last year. Or, oh, I bought this beautiful jar that's all fancy and pretty. No, any kind of a commercially made jar, they're not recommended for home canning. They're not designed for multiple use, and they do not withstand, get the words out here, they do not withstand the heat and the pressure that you need for proper canning. Okay, then we can talk about our canning lids. So canning lids are two-piece lids. They have a self-sealing flat lid. That's the vacuum cap. These are not reusable. Okay, we're going to use these once and then discard them because they will not get that good seal a second time. And then there's the metal ring that goes over the top of those and screws down on there. Those are reusable. Do not use old, rusted, dented, deformed lids or lids with defects in the sealing gasket. So in that rubber piece that goes around that's actually going to suck down and make that vacuum seal, there can't be nicks, cracks, cuts anywhere in there. So it is preferable that when you get ready that you purchase new lids, the flat piece that goes in there to make that seal, to make sure that you get a good quality one. And as I said, they're not reusable to do that. Now, so if you're using them for crafts and other things, that's great, but not for canning. And then you do have to prepare the lids as well. So we need to wash them in hot soapy water, make sure they're good and clean. Everything we use for food needs to be clean, right? That's just basic food safety. We're going to get them good and dry, set them aside until we want to use them. Then to preheat them, okay, we're going to preheat our jars. We're also going to preheat our lids. So we're going to submerge them in simmering water, simmering about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not place them in boiling water. Boiling water is going to soften that seal, and you're not going to get that good vacuum seal that you know you need. So it's important to make sure that we have the appropriate jars and the appropriate lids when we get ready to do any type of canning. Okay, and those things apply to both pressure canning as well as boiling water. So here again is an example of a recipe. These are kosher dill pickles, very basic, what's there, and then you're gonna use the processing times. You can see on there it talks about adjusting for the size of your jar as well as for the altitude. We're going to talk about that in one of our sections so that you kind of understand how that works as well. So just, pickling recipes must follow those tested vinegar and salt ratios because that's what ensures your safety. That's what's going to make sure we have enough acidity in that product so that it is canned safely and makes it shelf stable, a lot of these words, shelf stable so that you can store it and keep it and pull that out when you're ready. So substitutions or guessing ingredient amounts is not for canned food. This is not where we get to be creative and mess things around. We need to use those research-based recipes with the appropriate processing times for the size of jar that we have to ensure that those things are safe. Again, I'm Mindy Turner with the Curry County Cooperative Extension Service, your family and consumer science agent. We are looking at canning basics, just getting you started understanding terms and processes and what equipment you might need in order to do home food preservation. This has been part 2. I hope you will join me again for part 3.